Good evening. Welcome to the Napoleon Memoirs. This is where I obsess about Napoleon. And we're going to get into the memoirs of the person that I believe poisoned Napoleon, Count Charles Tristan de Montsalon. So far, everything seems pretty accurate. Just said something about Napoleon's brother I did not buy. Believe me, if he says anything that's not congruent with the other memoirs, I'll let you know. So far, this is all checking out, gotta say. All right, so what's going on here? The criminals had taken over France, the secret society criminals, and they want to get Napoleon out of the situation as quickly as possible. Now Napoleon has fallen under the power of the British Marine, Navy, whatever you want to call it. Poor Napoleon. Anyway, but this is his strategy. It's a very, very painful strategy to him, but what he wants is to expose this empire for what it is. And that's my job, to make sure that his suffering was not in vain. All right, so Montsalon's got all these letters. He's got all this documentary evidence of how Napoleon was tricked into going with the English government, but he could have run. He didn't run. He chose to let them do these horrible things to him because this was his great enemy, and he knew who they were. And he wants the public to know. And that's what this is about. This is a very dangerous empire. All right, so here we go. My dear General, on his part, General Becker, whose mission was now at an end, wrote to the Minister of War, Rochefort. This is a letter from General Becker. July 15th, 1815. My Lord, I have the honor to inform Your Excellency that the mission with which I have been charged by the provisional government, that of accompanying the Emperor Rochefort, has been this day accomplished in the roads of the Isle of Aix at 3 o'clock in the morning. His Majesty, convinced of the impossibility of proceeding to America on board a ship of war, disdained to have recourse to any secondary means to favor his voyage to the United States, and has adopted the noble resolution of writing to His Royal Highness the Prince Regent of England, claiming hospitality from him and the English nation. In consequence of this determination, the Emperor has gone aboard the English ship Bowerfen, Captain Maitland, who, by virtue of orders received from his government, has given His Majesty a reception worthy of a high rank, which he has occupied among the sovereigns of Europe. Should Your Excellency desire it, shall have the honor of my arrival in Paris to give in a more detailed report of the execution of the orders confided to me. I confine myself this evening to the confirmation of the fact of Napoleon's reception on board a British ship of war and his departure for Great Britain. This step he has adopted, repeating his anxious wishes for the reestablishment of peace and the independence of the country. Count Becker, Lieutenant General. Whilst General Becker's dispatch was on its way to announce to Louis XVIII that he was really King of France, we were pursuing our course towards England. At 10 o'clock in the evening, we fell in with the Admiral's ship coming towards us under full sail, having made a signal to us to cast anchor. She anchored close alongside the Bowerfen. The Admiral came to pay his respects to the Emperor and to request him to do him the honor to pay him a visit next day on board his ship, which was very appropriately named the Superb. The Emperor conversed for a long time with Admiral Hotham, appeared satisfied, accepted the invitation to breakfast on board the Superb, and every preparation it was made on board the Admiral's ship as far as a royal entertainment, and the emperor was received with all the honors usually paid to crowned heads. The admiral and all the officers of the squadron emulating each other in testifying their respect. And we were struck with great pains, which was taken to make us forget our cruel position. During the passage, the emperor dictated the following abstract of his position at the Isle of Aix. The English squadron was not strong. 2 corvettes were stationed off the mouth of the Gironde. They blockaded the French corvette Bayadere and gave chase to the Americans, which daily sailed from the river in great numbers. At the Isle of Aix, we had 2 frigates of the first class, the Salle and the Medusa, the corvette Falcon, and the brig Pervier. The whole of these were blockaded only by 174 of small size and 2 smaller vessels. Captain Poney of the Medusa offered to force the passage by engaging single-handed and at close quarters with the English ships. There can be no doubt that by running the risk of sacrificing 1 or 2 ships, we might have effected a passage, but Captain Philibert of the Salle, who commanded in the roads, refused to concur and even threatened to use force if any vessel under his orders should attempt to force a passage. It is probable that this officer had received direct instructions from Fouché, who was already openly acting as a traitor and wished to use all means to deliver me up to the Bourbons. There was no longer any hope of being able to reach the sea by means of the frigate said to have been put at my disposal by the provisional government, and I landed on the Isle of Aix. Garrison of the Isle of Aix was composed of an admirable regiment of Marines on which I could reckon. Officers had given me assurance of their devotion to my cause. The commandant of the island had been one of my former soldiers in Egypt, and the young officers of the navy promised to amend the Danish brig, which belonged to the father-in-law of one of them, or 2 chasse marées, in which they declared themselves ready to make their way through the English blockading ships during the night, and thus to gain the coast of America. It would have been necessary, however, to have touched at some part of the coast of Portugal for supplies, other with the brig or the chasse marées. Under these circumstances, I called a privy council composed of the officers of my suite, informed them of the impossibility of any longer calculating on reaching America by means of the frigates, and after having unreservedly explained to them my position, I requested them to give their opinions the course which it seemed best to adopt. 2 courses of action presented favorable chances: to try the fate of arms in France, or to appeal to the hospitality of England in order to commence the former. I could have placed myself at the head of 1,500 Marines, full of zeal, completely devoted to the cause of their leader. They would have conducted me to Rochefort, where I should have been reinforced by the garrison of that city, whose spirit was excellent. The garrison of La Rochelle was also confidently to be reckoned on. It was composed of 4 battalions of Confederates who had offered their services and were in a condition to form a junction with General Clausel, who commanded at Bordeaux and had protested his inviolable attachment to the cause of the empire. And further, this would have made it easy to unite the armies of La Vendée and the Loire, and to maintain a civil war if we could not have succeeded in re-entering Paris. But the chambers were dissolved. From 50 to 60,000 foreign bayonets were in France and were arriving from all sides. Civil war could have no other result than that of placing me as emperor in a better position to obtain arrangements more favorable to my personal interests. But I had renounced sovereignty and only wished for a peaceful asylum. I could not, therefore, consent to expose all my friends to destruction for such a result. to be the cause of the desolation of the provinces, and finally, in a word, to deprive the National Party of its true supports, by which sooner or later the honor and independence of France would be established. I only wished to live as a private individual. America was the most suitable place, country of my choice, but finally, England itself, with her positive laws, might be also a proper asylum. It appeared from the language of Captain Maitland that the Belfriend would convey me to England, where I should be under the protection of the English laws, and it was reasonable to believe that the English people were too fond of glory to fail in taking advantage of a circumstance which would form one of the brightest pages in the history of their country. I determined to go on board an English ship, but assuredly I would not have taken this course had I entertained any suspicion of the unworthy treatment which was reserved for me. My letter to the Prince Regent was a public declaration of my confidence in the generosity of my enemies, and Captain Maitland, to whom it was communicated before my going on board the Bellerophon, having made no observation on its contents, by this fact alone recognized and consecrated the sentiments which it contained. All right, so this is Napoleon's whole rationale for why he did what he did. Basically, he could have run and escaped much earlier, but he did not want that to be his legacy, that he ran and hid in America. He obviously could have done that, and he could have gotten there, and he would have been a fugitive, basically. This way, he said, I'm going to call these people out for what they are, as a bunch of liars. That's the truth. He knows his freaking empire is a bunch of liars. And he's saying, look, I'm gonna show you guys what you are. And he really did sacrifice himself. He knew what they were gonna do to him. I mean, Napoleon's playing a game. He really is playing a game, but it's a very tragic game that was very painful to him. But he wanted the world to know what this government is, and they've been covering it up ever since. That is the truth. It's very sad. And that's why I'm doing this. I want to make sure people know. I want his suffering to not be in vain. It's terrible what they did to him, but he was really letting everybody know they are not free. Their laws are nothing but something on the books. Now you can see that the laws are just some kind of joke. They completely trample them. And it was the same thing 200 years ago. It's worse now than it was then. But this is where they're laying all the groundwork for how it became today. It's out of control. Okay, anyway, so now we're going to look at Las Casas in Italian, where who knows what's going on here. Let's find out. Let's find out what's going on here. Let's see. I read Italian. Italian, not my strongest language by any means. All right, so Napoleon's not saying the lane, and he's reading everything he can get his hands on. All he can get is stuff from England. So he's got to learn English if he wants to read anything. Poor Napoleon. He loved to read. He's always trying to figure out how to get out, how to escape the traps he's in. All right, here we go. Commissione del Principio Reggente Sabato. 16, I can't remember now. L'imperatore aveva lasciato l'enciclopedia britannica per prendere le sue lezioni d'inglese negli Annual Register Silesia. L'avventura. Un certo Spencer Smith, arrestato agli inizi e condannato a ritornare a Valenciennes e che fuggi per via. Voglio essere una cosa semplicissima, diceva l'imperatore. Io di qui il narratore avrà fatto una grave storia. Questo affare mi è del tutto ignoto. Soggiunti secoli era una minuzia di polizia di believi importante perché potessi giungere insinuamente verso le 4 venne presentato all'imperatore il capitano delle spie che giungeva dall'Europa e il capitano del Ceylon che partiva per l'Inghilterra. L'imperatore era assai melanconico e sentivasi male, per cui l'accoglienza del primo fu brevissima. Quella del secondo sarebbe stata uguale se non avessi scosso l'imperatore chi è dentro, e se non avessimo letteri da inviare in Europa. L'imperatore allora mi disse di dove andarli se vendessi i principi recenti. Sulla sua affermativa ebbi l'incarico di tradurli, che l'imperatore aveva in animo di scrivere ai principi recenti, ma che per l'osservazione inqualificabili dell'ammiraglio che avrebbe aperto la lettera era si astenuto di farlo, come di cose contrarie alla dignità sua e a quella dello stesso principio recente che aveva ben inteso levare a cielo le leggi dell'Inghilterra, ma che in nessun luogo ne scorgeva il beneficio, non rimanergli più che aspettare, anzi desiderare un carnefice d'agonia che a gli si faceva provare esseri inumani, barbari. Sarebbe stato più leale, più energetico dargli la morte. L'imperatore mi ha fatto ripetere al capitano che volessi incaricarsi di questo discorso e l'ho accomiato. Quest'ultimo aveva la braghi sul volto e mostravasi imbaratissimo. Spirito da isola di Francia Dominica 17, un colonnello inglese arrivato dal capo e proveniente da isola di Francia si presentò questa mani a me per cercare di essere ammesso ad ossequiare l'imperatore. L'ammiraglio aveva concesso al suo vascello 2 o 3 ore di fermata, avendo ottenuto dall'imperatore che lo ricevessi verso le 4. Mi assicurò anzi preferirvi lasciar partire il fascio piuttosto che perdere sì belle occasioni. L'imperatore era malconcio di salute e aveva passato alcune ore nel bagno e alle 4 ricevetti il colonnello. L'imperatore gli volse parecchie interrogazioni sull'isola di Francia ceduta da poco agli inglesi. Pareva che la prosperità sua e il suo commercio soffrissero per il mutamento di dominazione. Partito il colonnello, rimasto solo con l'imperatore nel giardino, gli dissi che la memoria di lui si conservava carissima fra gli abitanti dell'isola di Francia, poiché giuste le asserzioni del colonnello. Il nome di Napoleone, che era sempre pronunziato con effetto reverente. Allora che giunsi qui la notizia della sua partenza dalla Francia e del suo arrivo a Plymouth. Era propriamente un giorno di festa solenne per la colonia, essendo pervenuta la novella durante la giornata, neppure un solo colono, né bianco né di colori, intervenne la sera al teatro. Non vi comparvero che inglesi, i quali rimasero imbarazzati e molto irritati. L'imperatore mi porgeva ascolto E dopo qualche istante di silenzio mi dissi: "È cosa semplicissima. Ci provo che gli abitanti dell'isola da Francia sono rimasti francesi. Io sono la patria." E si la mano. La patria è stata ferita in me e se ne affliggono. Aggiunsi che al nuovo dominio, impedendo le loro espressioni, non osavano pubblicamente far auguri per la sua prosperità, ma non mancava mai, diceva il colonnello, dichiara la salute di lui. Questa parola consacrata a queste particolarità lo commuovevano. Povera Francia, disegni con enfasi, povero popolo, povere nazioni, lo meritava tutto questo. Io ti amavo, ma tu non meritavi certamente tutti i mali che gravano su di te. Ah, tu eri bien degna che uno si sacrificasse tutto per te. E bisogna convenire quanta infamia, viltà e degradazione non mi circondarono e iniziandosi ai miei soggiunsi. Non parlo che dei nostri amici del sobborgo San Germano, poiché per essi è tutt'altra questione. Ci pervenivano spesso tratti e parole le quali somiglianti a quelli dell'isola di Francia erano atti e scoteri le più risposte fibre del cuore. L'isola dell'Ascensione, a noi vicina, era stata sempre deserta e abbandonata. Da che siamo che gli inglesi hanno pensato di fondarvi una stazione. Il capitano che era stato a prenderli possesso ci disse al suo ritorno essere stato compresso di gran meraviglia nel trovare al percano scritto sulla riva: "Viva sempre il grande Napoleone!" Negli ultimi giornali a noi pervenuti il mezzo a diversi tratti. Oddio, che di parole benevoли leggevasi scritto in varie lingue, che Parigi non sarebbe stata felice se non gli fosse stata ridotta la sua Elena. Erano alcuni stili di miele versato nel nostro calice d'ascensione. Well, Napoleon's saying here he would have sacrificed anything for France. He's so sad for them, for what's going to happen to them because they captured him. He knows terrible things are going to happen because he was captured, and he's constantly lamenting this in St. Helena, that he can't protect the people anymore from these individuals who have seized control of them, who are still in control to this day, 200 years later. And amazingly, there was a completely deserted island right next to St. Helena called Ascension. And one of the British soldiers happened to go by there, and they found a huge inscription that said, "May the great Napoleon live forever." So who's writing this on deserted islands? There was so much love for him. People understood what he represented. I want people to understand what he was all about. This is heartbreaking stuff. Okay, so now poor Lavalette is in jail, going to his trumped up trial where he's going to get sentenced to be executed for running the post office. So there is your subverted law system right there in France, 1815. This is the White Terror of 1815. Who's heard of this? You know, every time they come back, the terrorism comes back. Who are they? You know, figure out who they are, who the terrorists are, okay? Because you're not being told who they are. You're being told a lot of stories. The terrorists, it's very obvious to figure out who the terrorists are by now. I hope people can figure it out. You know the terrorists by the terrorism. All right. So Lavalette, the tragic story of Lavalette is his wife is literally losing her mind. Her baby dies in her arms because she's so sad about what's being done to her good husband that she came to love. She didn't want to marry him. Napoleon made her marry him, and she didn't want to marry him. But he was such an amazing person that she totally won him over. Lavalette was such an amazing person. I want everybody to know how great he was. All right, let's go. Mon intention n'est pas de retracer ici tous les états du jugement. Cependant, je ne dois pas passer sous silence quelques particularités que la lecture des débats qu'on a publiés n'explique pas. Les femmes et de neveux de M. Ferrand se trouverions à l'hôtel de poste. L'une et deux accompagna Madame Ferrand quand elle vint me demander un permis de poste. C'était la première fois de ma vie que je le voyais. Et ce n'est pas lui qui se présenta comme témoin à charge. Ce n'était ni sa taille, ni son visage, ni le même âge, ni le même son de voix. J'ignorais qui sont deux frères, et dans mon premier étonnement, me trouver en présence de l'inconnu. J'en fis la réflexion tout haut. Les témoins affirmaient cependant que c'était bien lui qui s'était présenté avec sa tante. La présidente me demanda ce que je voulais faire d'une imputation si grave. En effet, elle n'allait rien moins qu'à l'attaquer comme faux témoin. Mon avocat que j'ai consulté ne sut que répondre. Et probablement que je ne serais pas parvenue à prouver la vérité, mais je reste convaincue que j'avais raison. Quel motif a pu décider cette substitution de personne? Je l'ignore. L'année, c'est lui qui accompagnait sa tante était maître des requêtes, a-t-il eu de la répugnance à se présenter comme témoin à charge? Je n'ai pas revu du monsieur depuis cette époque. Il est amoureux en France après 5 ans d'exil. Il n'était plus temps et il aurait été impossible de porter la lumière sur une fait aussi étrange. L'avocat général Oua était un homme qui avait l'esprit fort exalté. Je ne suis pas la seule victime de son injuste sévérité qui est partageant à cette époque plusieurs autres officiers du parquet. Il s'était fait mon ennemi particulier. La violence de ses attaques, l'acharnement de sa haine lui fit repousser avec brutalité tout ce qui pouvait se présenter en ma faveur. L'issue du procès fut restituée à sa fortune. Il est maintenant conseiller à la Cour de cassation. La première juge, c'est pas ça, on interrogatoire. Le deuxième fut consacré au plaidoirie de mon avocat et de la partie publique. J'étais en face d'un auditoire très nombreux et qui n'était pas composé de mes amis. Cependant, l'animosité qui semblait dominer la première juge et qui s'expliqua plusieurs fois par des murmures, finit par s'adoucir. Et les préventions semblaient s'effacer à mesure qu'on avançait dans les débats. Et ce conçu me parut beaucoup plus favorable. Enfin, vers 6 heures du soir, les jurés à Lyon se retiraient peu émettre leur opinion. Lorsque la manière de poser les questions fut débattue entre l'avocat du roi et le mien, celui-ci demandait que les questions faisant ainsi posées. Première, l'accusé est-il coupable de conspiration? Deuxième, était coupable d'usurpation des pouvoirs. Il était clair que je n'étais pour rien dans la conspiration, puisque cette question avait été abandonnée, même au commencement des débats. Les jurés auraient prononcé mon absolution. Restait la seconde, sur laquelle j'allais être condamné, mais la peine de mort était écartée en séparant le complot des l'usurpation du pouvoir. Les jurés, me souviens, puisque l'absence du crime, ne c'est seulement la peine du délit. C'est ce que ne voulait pas le gouvernement, c'était la mort qui demandait aux jurés. Et voici le moyen infâme dont il se servit pour entraîner la majorité. Après un grand acte de justice, avait-on dit en secret au jury, c'était la condamnation du maréchal Ney. Il importe beaucoup que le roi puisse faire un grand acte de clémence. La politique et l'intérêt du monarque les voulant ainsi. Prononcez donc la peine capitale contre le prévenu. La vie lui sera conservée. La justice sera satisfaite. La société vengée et la beauté du roi brillera de toutes son éclat. Ainsi, les deux questions feront réunir en une allégerée et à la conscience et à la timidité du juré. On me reconduisit donc en prison. Sainte Rose qui était à l'audience vers me tenir compagnie. Je n'avais plus d'illusion, mais j'ai cherché à approcher celle de cet excellent jeune homme. Après un dîner fort triste, je lui proposai une partie d'échecs et je l'ai gagné contre la coutume, car il était plus fort que moi. Mais à mes yeux, que leur avancée, sa fermeté affaiblissait, et quand on les fit sortir à 10 heures, ils fondaient en larmes et ne pouvaient se séparer de moi. Je restais seule de mortelles heures, car ce ne fut qu'à minuit passé qu'on vint me chercher pour entendre la lecture de mon arrêt. La déclaration des jurys avait été lue pendant mon absence. Aussi les gendarmes qui me resteront au haut de l'escalier et qui m'accompagneront dans le cabinet du président garderont-ils au moins de silence. Je m'assis et les considérant avec attention. J'ai lu sur le visage la sentence de mort. Eh bien, dis-je, Aubretier, je suis condamné. On aide des comptes Bonaparte. Pouvait-il être quitté? Peu de réponse. Il me conduisit devant les juges, au silence profond, en immobilité, complètement régnant dans cette salle. Et moi, en si mal déclaré, les banquettes étaient encore assez garnies des femmes, les yeux fixés sur cette foule chercheront, en vain un visage bienveillant, un regard de compassion, en les dirigeant sur les jurés. J'en vis une seule dont les mouchoirs couvraient le visage. C'était M. Julien. Enfin, le président donna l'ordre au greffier de lire la déclaration des jurys. Je m'y attendais, mais redoutant plus que tout de me voir arracher la croix de la Légion. J'avais eu la précaution de l'ôter ainsi que les concordants et les autres insignes de la couronne de fer et de celle de Hollande. Les juges se retireront pour la fin pendant quelques minutes et tour et tour. Le président prononça hautement l'article du code criminel qui me condamnait à la peine capitale. Heureusement, la formalité d'arracher la croix de la Légion d'honneur fut omise. Cet ouvrage seul aurait pu détruire le calme de mon âme. Les petites circonstances qui les journaux ont recueillies sont exactes et je ne les rapporte pas ici. À minuit et demi, j'aurais senti dans mon cachot, dans le corridor qui les précédait. Je rencontrais le concierge qui est venu au-devant de moi et qui me questionne tranquillement. Tout est fini, lui dis-je. Cet homme recula comme si on lui eût donné un violent coup dans l'estomac. Quand il disparu, je m'étais contenu devant le public. Comme la nuit et la solitude rappelleront à mon oreille ce terrible peine de mort. L'agitation de mon âme commença par l'explosion d'une vive indignation. Je me prenais à grands pas. Je en appelais à la France entière contre l'iniquité du jugement. Peu à peu, cependant, je me calmais et bientôt je trouvais dans ce sommeil profond d'oubli de mon malheur. So, Babylon is in this completely trumped up trial against him. He's accused of conspiracy of all things, which he actually, there was no conspiracy. Napoleon came back to France and everybody wanted him to be the king of France. There's no conspiracy in that. He was the sovereign leader of that country. And then the conspirators accused all the people around Napoleon of conspiracy. There was no conspiracy. Anyway, so he was actually acquitted of conspiracy of all things. And then they got him on usurpation of something for operating the post office. He was usurping some kind of thing. So they announced that they were going to kill him. So he's saying how incredible that was for him to realize they were going to kill him for just how terrible things had gotten. Anyway, so that's what happens here. He is condemned to death for operating the post office. That's terrorism. That is terrorism. And people need to understand who keeps doing this to us. The terrorism. Lala was like the best person. And he's saying at the trial, could an aide-de-camp of Napoleon ever be acquitted in here? So that's what he was saying he's guilty of. He's guilty of being loyal to Napoleon. And they were going to kill him for that. And they killed Napoleon and they killed all kinds of people just because they have to get these good people out of the way so they can take over and get everything that they want all the time and run their schemes. Okay, so it's time for Dr. Antumarchi, the Corsican doctor who makes his way to St. Helena to try to help Napoleon at the end, but there's no helping him because he's in a place that cannot support life. All kinds of people died at Longwood. Hepatitis, just nobody could live there. So, like I've said, there's all of these British soldiers died. All of these people died. So they could kill Napoleon and say it was natural causes. There's a huge body count on this. But you don't hear about that. You're not going to hear about that from anybody but me. That shows you who runs the media. Who runs the media? Okay? The people who are never going to tell you that huge numbers of people died so they could pretend Napoleon died of natural causes. Because they don't care. They want these people dead. It's the opposite of what we're being told. Really the opposite of what we're being told. Big time. Big time. Absolutely. Okay, so now it's time. And Antumarchi goes into disgusting detail of what Napoleon's going through as his digestive system is being slowly destroyed by this slow arsenic poison. It can only be Montaigne who's doing it. And Montaigne's always in debt. He always needs money. He can't get a real job. Maybe he can't get a real job. Maybe that's just the way the situation is. He's an aristocrat. His father is a secret society guy named Semeville. He's in the pocket. He's pocket of the Count d'Artois, this French royal who eventually becomes king of France. And that's who's pulling Montaign's strings. And Montaigne is always needing money. He's just bad with money. Anyway, who knows about these people? But if people can't live without luxury, they will do anything to maintain their lives of luxury, and they will kill for it. And that's what you have with Montaigne and his wife. They can't work, but they have to be rich. And those are the people that do these things. 27 de julio, la noche ha sido mala, el dolor de hígado se acrecienta y extiende por toda la región costa derecha, prolongándose hasta la espalda. Sienti acerbo dolores en los intestinos. Tieni tos seca, náuseas frecuentes, vómitos biliosos, violento dolor de cabeza, opresión y finalmente el color pálido y hambriento. El enfermo se niega a tomar el agua de arroz. Juzgue conveniente prescribirle una purga antibiliosa, bebidas anodinas, lavativas simples, fomentos y lineamentos. Tomó su baño. A la 1 del día apenas había producido efecto la purga. A las 10 de la noche se hallaba un poco mejor el emperador. 28 de julio sigue mejor el emperador. El dolor del hígado se ha disipado enteramente, pero el pie está todavía un poco hinchado. Linimento y baño. 29 de julio. Sin novedad, linimento y baño. 30 de julio, igual estado y iguales medicamentos. Le aconsejo por segunda vez las aguas termales. 31 de julio, a las 10 de la mañana. Hallándose el emperador muy restablecido y con bastantes fuerzas para salir bajo el jardín, habíanse traído peces para proveer los viveros que habíamos abierto y quiso echarlos al mismo el agua. Los niños del gran mariscal que le vieron bajaron corriendo y al que había algunos días que no nos veía y se proponía llamarlos. Tuvo mucho gusto en que se anticipase. Llamad al doctor, dijo al general Montholon, pues tengo necesidad de su ministerio para que me y estas orejitas al mismo tiempo. Mostraba las de ortencita y desplegaba de un papel unos zarcillos de coral. Yo me preparé a hacer aquella operacióncita, mas la vista del instrumento produjo su efecto. La niña oraba tanto que el emperador estaba indeciso por miedo de disgustar a su madre, mas con sus persuasiones y la vista de los pendientes se enjugaron pronto las lágrimas. Retiramos a la sombra de una encima y el general Monson sostenía a la paciente. Napoleón miraba y el chiquito Arturo revolvía, gritaba y no quería que hiciesen daño a su hermana. Su cólera amenaza y sus frases inglesas derretían a Napoleón, que le decía: ¿qué dices tú, picaruelo? Si no te calles, voy a hacerte agujerear las orejas. Veamos si te estás quieto. Esto ya estaba concluida la operación y pasado los zarcillos. Napoleón abrazó a la amable niña, felicitándola por su valor, y la despidió diciéndole: va a enseñar las orejas a tu madre, y si la encuentra mal y no estuviese contenta, dile que no soy yo, sino el doctor Accio quien las ha agujereado. Sí, señor, dijo ella, y dando saltos desapareció. This is so sad. Anyway, so there was this little girl named Hortense who was his Grand Marshal's daughter. His Hortense's mother was Queen Hortense's sort of her cousin. So she was named a beautiful little girl who was in St. Helena with Napoleon. And they pierced her ears. And she was crying and screaming about it. And Napoleon gave her these beautiful coral earrings, so she stopped crying. And he said, if your mother's mad, tell her it wasn't me. This is one of the little sad moments. But he loved having children around him. And there were a few children, and they helped him cope. Anyway, this guy's a German. Anyway. Der General bis Krone und schlagt ein Brücke über die Edge. Der französische General befahl der Division Bessere, wieder über die Edge zu gehen und sich auf dem rechten Ufer zu sammeln. Er wartete nun während des ganzen Erdreisten das auf, was sich an diesem Tage so an der Edge der bei Krone zugetragen haben konnte. Dies wurde von Truppen eingekündigt, sich bereit zu halten, einen Nachmarsch zu machen und am 10 Uhr abends unter den Waffen zu sein. Die Division, welche sich zu diesem Salo befand, rückte um 11 nach Castelnuovo unerwartet weiter Befehl. Es regnete in Strömen. Die Soldaten waren unter den Waffen, aber der Obergeneral wusste noch nicht, nach welcher Seite hin er sie beorten solle. Um 10 Uhr abends kamen die Rapporte von Montebaldo und Reche an Schubert meldete, dass am 13. Früh 9 Uhr der Feind große Streitkräfte entwickelte und der Sieg den ganzen Tag übergeschlagen habe. Seine Stellung sei sehr eingeengt und daher habe er das Glück gehabt, sich zu halten, da er aber mittags um 2 Uhr gewahr wurde, dass er durch den Marsch einer österreichischen Division, die Garde sich sicher hingesogen und sicher zwischen Peschier und ihm anzustellen gedacht habe, auf der linken Flanke umgangen sei. Seine Rechten aber dasselbe Schicksal durch eine der feindlichen Division bevorstehte, sich links des linken Ufers der Edge hingesogen, eine halbe Stunde über Rivoli in der Brücke geschlagen, darauf den Fluss passierte habe und nun an dessen rechten Ufer hin marschiere. Nach dem Fuße des Montebaldo sich hinzuhängen, um das Plateau von Rivoli zu nehmen. So habe er es für unvermeidlich gehalten, eine Brigade aufzuschicken, um sich des Plateaus von Rivoli als des Schlusses der ganzen Stellung zu versichern. Gegen 4 Uhr habe er es für nötig erreichte, selbst die Krone zu verlassen, um noch 2 Tage auf jenem Plateau anzulagen. Dass er morgen vor 9 Uhr wieder zu raumen genötigte seine Wörter an. Der Unterreitscher hatte der Feind das linke Ufer besetzt. Wir standen auf dem rechten. Nun zeigte sich der Plan des Feindes deutlich. Es war einleuchtend, dass er mit 2 großen Armeen auf Montebaldo und die Unterreiche hinwirkte. Die Division Roshin hinreichen, des Übergang über den Fluss streitig zu machen und zu verteidigen. Bei Montebaldo aber war kein Augenblick zu verlieren, weil der Feind durch die Wegnahme des Plateaus von Rivoli sich mit seiner Artillerie und Kavallerie verbinden wollte, und wenn man ihn daher angreifen konnte, ehe er dieses wichtigen Punktes war, er genötigt sein würde, sicher oder Artillerie und Kavallerie zu schlagen. Es war kein Zweifel mehr unterworfen, dass des Feindes Hauptangriff der Montebaldo geschah. Alle Truppen wurden also nach Sicre, dem Plateau von Rivoli, hingebührt er um 2 Uhr des Morgens begab Sicre, der Obergeneral selbst dahin. Stadt von Rivoli, das Wetter hatte Sicre aufgeklärt und es war herrlicher Mondenschein. Der Kaiser bestieg mehrere Rohren und betrachtete von da aus die verschiedenen Linien der feindlichen Feuer, die erfüllten das Terrain zwischen der Elche und dem Gardasee. Die Lust war ganz celeste davon, sehr gut unterschied man 5 Korps, die aus 5 Divisionen, welche schon Tages vorher ihre Bewegungen angefangen hatten, formiert zu sein erschienen. Die Feuer der Bivouacs zeigten 40 bis 60.000 Mann an. Die Franzosen sollten früh um 6 Uhr zu Rivoli 22.000 Mann stark sein, immer noch eine sehr große Ungleichheit. Wir hatten aber den Vorteil über den Feind 68 Kanonen und einige 1000 Mann Reiterei zu haben. Nach der Stellung der feindlichen Bivouacs ergab sich klar, dass sie uns gegen 9 Uhr morgens greifen wollten. Die Kolonne Rex, die noch sehr weit entfernt war, sollte das Plateau von Rivoli von hinten umsingeln. Sie konnte vor 10 Uhr niederlagen. Die erste Division des Zentrums sollte die Bestimmung haben, von links herunterstellung anzugreifen. Die zweite Wolke auf der oberen Kammer des Monte Ballo bei St. Marco stand, hatte den Zwacker Sicre der Kapelle von St. Martos bemächtigen das Plateau von Rivoli herabschrucken und der Kolonne links, welches sich ein Fuß dem Montevaldo hingezogen hatte und die jetzt am Rande des Plateaus längs der Alche hin in der Tiefe des Tals bivouakiert, den Weg zu öffnen. Das 5. Bivouak schien eine Reservedivision. Es befand sich weiter hinten. All right, so Napoleon's still talking about the conquest of Italy. This is about Bovaredo. Okay, so good night. Thank you for listening.